What is up, enthusiasts? It is Cedar Flags here, and welcome back to another one of my videos. Recently on my YouTube channel, I've been starting to review a lot of coasters. And why is that? It's for, let's say, a plethora of reasons. Either I have a unique opinion on it, or it's just an impressive coaster, or it could be a ride that not too many people talk about. And for this video's sake, it's the third reason, and a little bit of the second. Today, I'm going to be talking about Michigan's Adventures Shining Star, Shivering Timbers. This is a CCI wooden coaster that opened up all the way back in 1998, and is still the headline coaster to this day. But why don't many people talk about this ride? Today, I'm going to talk about my personal experience on Shivering Timbers, tell you what I think about it, and see if it's an underrated gem, or just something that's fairly rated. This is Cedar Flags, and today, I will be reviewing Shivering Timbers. So, before I give the ride a final rating and state my overall opinion on it, I want to first talk about my experience riding it, just so you can get an in-depth perspective of my view of this ride. I first rode this and last rode this in late June of 2022, and I have to say, it was a very interesting visit. Lines were pretty weak, and I got to ride this a few times, probably around a dozen. And I have to say that this ride was just a very impressive ride. I mean, I had expectations set up for it, and they were completely different from what I expected. So let's get into it. It starts off going into the parking lot because this is the first thing you see, and it is right in front of you. This might be the most visually impressive roller coaster I've ever seen in my life. Some rides like the Voyage at Holiday World and El Toro at Great Adventure come close, but this ride just looks beautiful. It's hill after hill, stretching over a half a mile out and back. It just goes on and looks like it goes on forever. It looks like gravity's turned off. But anyways, getting into the plaza of the ride, it looks even more menacing up close. And even though there isn't that much theming, there is a lot of room to look at the ride and get some off-ride shots, whether it be outside of the park or in the plaza, viewing that helix or viewing the hills from a distance. The queue itself is generic, and the station is, well, I have to admit, I was not a fan of this station whatsoever. It's a pretty ugly station, but I mean, if the ride's good and the station's bad, why complain? Anyways, this ride has normal PTC lap bars for restraints, and a lot of people aren't fans of these, but I honestly don't mind them that much. I'm actually a big fan of these. So I sat down, put in my seatbelt, put in my lap restraint, and they do not tighten the restraints that much. I mean, they definitely don't give you a lot of room, enough to be safe, but they don't staple you as well. It is pretty good. So, once the ride is dispatched, you make a left-hand turn and go into a very menacing looking lift hill. I mean, this lift hill is tall, it is long, and it is high up. You are on top of the world, because nothing around this coaster is taller besides maybe the Sky Coaster, but it's behind you. The trees of Michigan are just surrounding you, and you see them for miles on end. And you see that in the Shivering Timbers that are yet to come. And after that comes the first drop. As the traditional PTC trains were cresting the summit of the 122-foot lift, many thoughts were running through my brain. Is this ride going to be better than I expect, or a disappointment? Did I travel all this way for one of the best wooden coasters in the world, or a decent woody? And then I go over the drop. And many people don't really like the drop on Shivering Timbers, but let me say, as someone who was sitting in the back row, this blew my mind completely. You know the drop on Raven at Holiday World, the one that goes into the woods, the fifth drop? It felt exactly like that. I flew right out of my seat into my PTC restraint and was out of my seat the whole way down. Being very confused compared to the opinions I saw, I was expecting a much better ride than I would have anticipated at the beginning. I go back into my seat and I pull some pretty intense positive G's, especially for a traditional woody. I go over the next hill, the first major camelback of the ride, and get some good floater airtime. And I thought, if the rest of the ride was half as good as that last hill, this is going to rank pretty high in my rankings. I go over the second camelback, and it's even a little stronger. And I knew at that point that this is a really good seat on a really good ride. Now, I have to mention in particular, the ride was a little rough at this point, especially at this section of the ride. Now, it's not too rough to bother me, but it was definitely rough enough to disappoint some other enthusiasts. Going into the ride's third camelback, I wasn't expecting anything different, maybe some floater airtime and a good ride experience, but out of all the elements on this ride, this one impressed me the most, and is probably one of the strongest airtime moments I've ever experienced in my life. Now initially going over the curve of the hill, you experience normal floater, but as you reach the end of the hill, for some reason, similar to how Skyrush's first drop is, you pop out of your seat in a much stronger version of negative G's, and then instantly slam back into your seat. And I have to say, the forces are strong. Maybe too strong for some regular Advid Park goers, because every time I rode that part of the ride, it hurt my back a little bit. But not in the bad way. I think it was just because the airtime was so strong, and added with the decent amount of roughness with the ride. But once again, I'm someone who likes that kind of stuff. You go over the fourth camelback, get some great floater airtime. This continues until the turnaround. And the turnaround was something I really wasn't expecting at all as well. But the turnaround pulled some pretty good laterals. If you were sitting on the left side of the train, you would have been slammed into the side of the seat. This is a very impressive element and one of the best lateral moments out of any coaster I've ever been on. You go into a place where I assume would be a mid-course brake run, but then you go off into the drop after the halfway point. This is the way back, and you are only halfway done with your ride experience, and you get some pretty good laterals and airtime going down that one drop. Now, the return trip is actually very similar, though it is consisted of smaller airtime moments rather than large camelbacks. Now, even though I do enjoy the camelbacks at the beginning of the ride, as opposed to these hills give pretty good airtime as well, but then there are some that don't really give that much airtime at all, but those are few and far in between. And this is a very interesting part of the ride, because you really can't see that much ahead of you when you are in this finale section of the ride. You go over one airtime moment, then another, and another, and another, and it just keeps going, and it feels like it lasts forever. As someone who marathoned this ride and studied the layout through POVs, I even got confused. The finale of the ride consists of not an airtime moment, not a massive camelback, but another lateral moment. This is the finale helix, the one that everyone sees in the queue, and the one that really caps off this ride. You're thinking this ride could never end, but unfortunately, there is an end to everything. So in the final part of the video, I want to talk about my overall thoughts and where I rank this ride. Now, guessing off of the review, I'm pretty sure that you could tell that I really do enjoy this ride more than most enthusiasts. In fact, out of many wooden coasters, this is my second favorite, only behind El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. This is a fun wooden coaster, and it has a spot in my top 10. Now, talking about if it is an underrated coaster or not, I would say yes and no. Underrated usually depicts that the ride has been ridden many times, but people don't really talk about it because they don't like it as much. But I just feel like people don't come out to this ride and ride it. But fortunately I got to, and I do not regret it at all. I say if you're a fan of those classic wooden coasters, come out to Michigan's Adventure and ride it for yourself. I wouldn't say it's the most underrated coaster I've been on, depending on that logic. I think that reward might go to something like Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom or Copperhead Strike at Carowinds. But still, this is a top 10 coaster and one of the best coasters I've ever been on. Let me know what you think of this ride in the comments below if you've been on it, and let me know if you're going to ride it soon. This is Cedar Flags, and I'll see you all later.